I walked into the living room that Saturday morning, half expecting to hear Sarah's voice again. That same hurried tone she always had when things weren't quite right. But instead, I was greeted by silence. The kind that fills the space around you, settling like a thick fog. It was a weird, uncomfortable silence, one that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. When I saw the door was slightly ajar and no sign of Sarah, I immediately felt something was off. I looked down at the little girl standing in the middle of the room, clutching her stuffed bear to her chest, her big eyes wide and filled with that strange kind of stillness. "Lily, sweetheart, where's your mommy?" I asked, kneeling down to her level, trying to keep my voice calm. She didn't answer, just blinked slowly, her fingers tightening around the bear. She looked confused, like she didn't know how to explain it to me, or maybe she just didn't have the words. I glanced back at the door, half expecting Sarah to burst through at any second. I was still giving her the benefit of the doubt, convinced she'd just gotten caught up with something, but deep down, I knew that gut feeling. Those quiet whispers in the back of your mind that tell you something's wrong wasn't going away. A couple of hours passed, and the knot in my stomach only got tighter. I kept pacing from the kitchen to the living room, checking my phone for any sign of a message or missed call from Sarah. Nothing. It wasn't like her to disappear like this, especially when she knew Lily was here with me. She wasn't the best at being a mom, but she always showed up when it came to the kid. Always. I decided to call her. And then I called again. And again. It was starting to feel ridiculous, like I was some kind of crazy person, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something bad had happened. "Sarah, where are you? I'm getting worried now. Please call me back." I left the message, my hands shaking as I hit the end button. But there was no response. I sat there in my living room, staring at my phone screen, trying to make sense of it. Maybe she had gotten into some kind of trouble, or maybe she was just pulling one of her usual stunts, playing the part of the irresponsible adult who somehow found herself wrapped up in something she couldn't get out of. But it was late afternoon by the time I started feeling real panic. It wasn't just Sarah that had me on edge now. It was Lily. The little girl had started wandering around the house, muttering to herself in a way that made me feel even more uncomfortable. "Lily, do you want a snack?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. She nodded but still didn't say anything. I gave her some crackers and juice, but when I turned to grab a napkin, she was gone. I didn't even hear her leave the room. She was so quiet, like a shadow slipping through my fingers. I called her name a few times, panic setting in as I walked through the house, checking all the rooms. I found her by the window in the hallway, staring out into the street, as if waiting for someone. "Sweetheart, what are you doing?" She didn't answer, just stared out there, her face so serious. I walked over to her, feeling the cold breeze from the open window. I shut it and gently took her hand. "We're gonna find your mommy, okay? She's probably just stuck in traffic or something." But I had no idea what was really happening. Hours passed, the sky darkening, and still no sign of Sarah. My phone was dead, and the weight of the situation felt like it was closing in on me. By the time I finally plugged it in and saw I had a missed call, I thought maybe, just maybe, things were about to be okay. I didn't know yet that it wasn't Sarah's voice I'd hear when I called back. It was a police officer. "Ma'am, we need to talk to you about Sarah." The words felt like they'd hit me in the chest, knocking the air out of me. "What do you mean? What's happened to her?" "We're trying to locate her. And, ma'am, we also need to speak to you about some missing property." I don't know what came over me, but it felt like the room was spinning. "What do you mean, missing property? What the hell is going on?" The officer's tone shifted, but it wasn't what I wanted to hear. "I'm afraid Sarah has left town unexpectedly, and your wallet's gone missing. We've already contacted the bank." My stomach dropped. $3,000. My $3,000. The money I had just withdrawn from my trip, the trip I had been planning for months. Gone. I felt my throat tighten as everything started to connect in my head. It wasn't just Sarah disappearing. It wasn't just Lily being left behind. My cousin had taken my money, and I had no idea where she was or why she did it. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was Lily. She was here alone with me, and I had no clue what was going on. The phone call ended, but my heart didn't stop pounding. I stood there, looking at the little girl holding her bear like she knew something I didn't. And in that moment, I realized this was only the beginning. I didn't know what to think anymore. I had been through the panic, the confusion, the shock of Sarah's disappearance, and the missing money. But now, as I sat in the living room, my mind was racing in circles, unable to grab hold of anything solid. I kept glancing at Lily, who was sitting cross-legged on the floor, her bear held tightly in her arms, as if it was the only thing keeping her grounded. She didn't look frightened, or at least not the way I would expect a child to be when abandoned by her mother. It was almost as if she understood more than she let on. I called my brother, Mark, and told him everything. I needed someone to talk to, someone who could help me make sense of the mess that was suddenly my life. But he just seemed annoyed, almost dismissive. "You're making a big deal out of nothing," he said when I told him about the police call and the missing money. "Sarah's probably just dealing with her own stuff, and Lily's fine, right? You've got her, and she's not hurt, so relax." I tried to explain, but Mark kept cutting me off, telling me I was overreacting. He didn't get it. It wasn't just about the money. It was about trust and family and the fact that Sarah had just disappeared without a word. How could he not understand that? "I'm telling you, Mark, something's wrong. I don't know what it is, but I can feel it. Sarah wouldn't leave Lily like this unless she had no choice. And then there's the money. She took it, Mark. She took my money," I said, my voice rising with frustration. "Stop with the drama, will you? It's just $3,000. You'll survive," he snapped back. The way he said it so coldly, like it was nothing, made me feel even more alone. I hung up, the anger boiling in my chest. My own family didn't even care. All they could do was brush it off like it didn't matter. It was late, well after dinner, when I decided to go to the police station. The officer I spoke to earlier had been vague, barely giving me any useful information, but I needed answers. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for Sarah to show up or call. I had to do something. When I arrived, the station was quieter than usual, the hum of fluorescent lights the only noise in the otherwise still air. I approached the front desk, where a young officer was sitting, typing something into the computer. "I'm here to speak with Detective Harris. I need to know what's going on with Sarah." The officer didn't even look up. "She's not here right now. You can leave a message." "I'm not leaving a message," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, but failing. "I need answers. Where's Sarah? What's happening with the investigation? You got her phone records, right? You can trace where she's been, what she's doing." The officer finally glanced up, his eyes flat, like he'd heard the same complaint 1,000 times before. "Lady, you're overreacting. We've got no real evidence of a crime. She's an adult. She left willingly. There's nothing to go on." I felt my stomach drop again, the same sick feeling creeping back. "She took my money," I said, almost in a whisper, as if saying it aloud would make it more real. "You don't think that's important?" The officer sighed, clearly irritated by my persistence. "Look, we're doing what we can. If she's not back by tomorrow, then we'll start looking into it more seriously, okay?" I felt my anger rising again, but this time, I bit my tongue. There was no point arguing with him. I walked out of the station, the night air hitting me like a slap in the face. I felt lost, completely alone in this mess. No answers, no clues, just Lily, still at my house, and a sense of dread that I couldn't shake. When I got home, I found Lily asleep on the couch, her bear still clutched tightly in her arms. I didn't know what to do with her, but I couldn't just let her sit there, waiting for a mother who wasn't coming back. I made some calls, hoping to find a temporary solution, someone who could take her in until I figured out what was going on with Sarah. But everyone I reached out to, my parents, my friends, seemed to have their own reasons for not being able to help. One after another, they made excuses, promising to check in later, but never offering a real solution. I was on my own. At some point in the early hours of the morning, I found myself sitting in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, staring at Lily as she slept. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something I was missing, something important. I had always thought of Sarah as impulsive and irresponsible, but this was different. She was hiding something, and I couldn't let it go. I sat there for hours, wondering what she was mixed up in, why she would leave Lily like this, and where she had gone. It didn't make sense. And then I remembered something, a small detail, something so insignificant at the time that I'd barely given it a second thought. The last time I saw Sarah, she'd been wearing a new jacket. It wasn't like her to spend money on herself. In fact, she always made a point of complaining about how she could never afford nice things. But this jacket, it was expensive. I remember the brand. I'd seen it in a store once, and the price tag had made me stop in my tracks. It didn't add up. I had to know more. I couldn't let this go. I spent the next few hours going through Sarah's things. It wasn't something I was proud of, but I needed answers, and I wasn't about to just sit around waiting for the police or anyone else to figure it out. As I rifled through her old purse and the clutter she'd left in the corner of the room, I found something that made my heart skip a beat. A receipt. It was buried in the bottom of a bag, hidden between a few old receipts from fast food places and a crumpled napkin. The date on it was just a few days ago. I picked it up, the words on the paper almost too much to process. It was for a cash withdrawal. $3,000. The exact amount that was missing from my account. Everything stopped. My mind couldn't process it at first. Why would Sarah have taken out $3,000 just before disappearing? What was she planning? I couldn't breathe. This wasn't a coincidence. Sarah had planned this. But why? And where was she now? I couldn't sit still. The receipt felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket, its significance gnawing at me. I had to know where Sarah had gone, why she had taken my money, and what she was planning to do with it. But every time I thought I had a solid lead, it seemed to slip right through my fingers. I called the bank to get more information about the cash withdrawal. The bank employee told me over the phone that they couldn't release specific details about Sarah's transaction without her consent, but she did mention one small piece of information. The withdrawal had been made at a branch on the outskirts of town. That wasn't much, but it was a starting point. I wasn't about to sit and wait anymore. I had no idea where Sarah was, but the fact that she had gone to such lengths to cover her tracks meant she wasn't just running from something. She was running to something. I grabbed my keys, pulled on my jacket, and left the house. Lily was still asleep, wrapped up in blankets on the couch. I didn't want to leave her, but I knew I had no choice. I had to get answers. The branch was just outside town, a place I had never really paid attention to. It was in a small strip mall, tucked between a discount store and a quiet cafe. The bank itself was no more than a simple, one-story building. I parked my car and walked inside, my nerves a bundle of tight wires in my stomach. I approached the teller and asked about the withdrawal. Her expression was polite but distant. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I can't release any details of that transaction," she said, her voice rehearsed like she had dealt with people like me all too often. I wasn't about to back down. "Look, I'm not asking for private details. I just want to know if Sarah's been in here. It's important." She hesitated, glancing over her shoulder as if she expected someone to intervene. Then, almost reluctantly, she reached under the counter and pulled out a file. She flipped through it quickly, and I held my breath. "She came in a few days ago," the teller said, her fingers tapping lightly against the file. "But there's more. She didn't just withdraw cash. She also opened a new account, a joint account with a man named Thomas Hargrave. I don't have the full details here, but it's on record." I felt my blood run cold. Thomas Hargrave. The name didn't ring a bell at first, but something about it seemed familiar. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I needed to get more information, and I needed to act fast. "Do you have an address for him?" I asked, trying to sound calm, though inside, everything was unraveling. The teller shook her head. "Sorry, ma'am, I can't give you that, but you could try asking the police." The police. The same police who had brushed me off when I asked for help. I couldn't rely on them to find Sarah. If I wanted answers, I had to do this myself. I thanked the teller and walked out of the bank, my mind racing. I didn't know where else to turn, but I remembered something that I had overlooked before. Sarah's old friend, Rachel. She had always been in the background of our family gatherings, but lately she'd kept her distance. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen her, but I knew she and Sarah had been close for a long time. Maybe Rachel knew something. Maybe she had more insight into what Sarah was up to than I did. I found her number in my phone and dialed, holding my breath. The phone rang twice before she picked up. "Hello." Rachel's voice sounded cautious, like she wasn't sure who was calling. "Rachel, it's me, Anna. I need your help. It's about Sarah." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Rachel spoke, her voice hesitant. "What about Sarah? Is everything okay?" "I don't know. That's what I'm trying to figure out. She left Lily at my house, disappeared, and I think she took my money. But there's more. She's been in contact with someone named Thomas Hargrave. Do you know him?" I heard a sharp intake of breath from Rachel. Thomas Hargrave? What do you mean she's been in contact with him? I'm not sure, but she opened a joint account with him at the bank, I said, my voice tight. Do you know him? Can you tell me anything? Rachel went silent for a long moment, and I could almost hear her thinking, the hesitation in her voice growing thicker with each second. She started but then stopped herself. Anna, I don't know if I should be telling you this, but Sarah's been seeing him for a while now. I thought it was just some fling, but now I'm not so sure. Seeing him? My mind spun, trying to make sense of the words. What do you mean? Why didn't you tell me? I didn't know what to say, Rachel admitted, her voice small. I thought Sarah was just going through another one of her phases. But this isn't like her. Thomas is dangerous, Anna. He's not the kind of guy you want to mess with. Dangerous? What are you talking about? Rachel sighed, her voice lowering to almost a whisper. He's got a criminal record. He's been involved in some bad stuff, fraud, money laundering, and worse. Sarah got mixed up with him after she started having money problems. I didn't want to get involved, but I think he's the reason she's gone. She's been hiding things from you, Anna. I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner, but I thought it was just a phase. I didn't know she'd get in so deep. I stood frozen in place, her words hitting me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just about Sarah anymore. This was about a whole other world of danger I had never seen coming. My cousin had gotten involved with someone dangerous, someone who didn't care about the people around him. And now, he was involved in the mess that was destroying everything I knew. Where is she, Rachel? Where can I find her? I asked, my voice desperate. I don't know for sure, but last time I heard, Thomas was staying in a rundown apartment complex on the edge of town. I don't have the exact address, but I can give you a general idea of where it is. But Anna, please be careful. This isn't something you can just walk into. You're not dealing with regular people here. I felt a new wave of determination wash over me. I didn't care how dangerous it was. I wasn't going to sit around and wait for the police to figure it out. I was going to find Sarah, and when I did, I was going to make sure she answered for everything. The apartment complex Rachel mentioned was on the outskirts of town, far from the safe, familiar streets I knew. It was the kind of place you'd pass by without giving it a second thought. A rundown, low-rise building with peeling paint and broken windows. As I drove through the area, I could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on me. It was one thing to be suspicious, but now, as I stared at this place, it was clear this was no longer about just finding Sarah. It was about stepping into a world I didn't understand, a world where the rules were different, where people like Thomas Hargrave thrived. I parked my car down the street, not wanting to draw attention to myself, and sat for a moment, trying to steady my nerves. My mind kept flashing back to the way Rachel had sounded on the phone, how she had warned me about Hargrave, how she had almost begged me not to go through with this. I understood her fear. I felt it too. But there was no turning back now. I wasn't about to let Sarah disappear without at least trying to help her. No matter what it took, I walked toward the entrance of the building, each step feeling heavier than the last. The front door was propped open by a cracked brick, and a strange smell hit me as soon as I stepped inside. Stale air, like it hadn't been ventilated in years. I hesitated, scanning the hallway. The walls were scarred with graffiti, and a broken light flickered above. There were no sounds, nothing to suggest that anyone was around. I felt exposed, vulnerable. This wasn't a place where people cared if you showed up or not. I had no idea what floor Hargrave lived on, so I decided to take a chance and head to the top, hoping that if I started there, I could work my way down. The elevator was out of service, so I took the stairs, each step creaking beneath my weight, making me wince. I reached the top floor, but there were only a few doors, all of them cheap, flimsy-looking things. I knocked on the first one I came across, waiting for what felt like an eternity. Nothing. I moved to the next door, knocking harder this time. Still nothing. I was about to turn away when I heard a noise. Footsteps, coming from behind one of the doors. My heart jumped in my chest, and I instinctively stepped back. The door opened slightly, just enough for a man to peer out. I recognized him instantly. Thomas Hargrave. He looked just as Rachel had described him. Rough around the edges, his clothes ill-fitting, his face weathered with the kind of lived-in toughness that only comes from years of making bad decisions. He stared at me, his eyes narrowing, like he had no idea why I was here. For a moment, Neither of us said anything. It was as if we were both sizing each other up, trying to figure out what the other wanted. "Can I help you?" His voice was gruff, his gaze scanning me up and down as if I was some kind of inconvenience. I wasn't sure what I expected from him. Anger maybe, defensiveness. But what I got was a cold indifference, a look that suggested I didn't matter, that I was just a small problem to be dealt with. "I'm looking for Sarah," I said, keeping my voice steady even though every muscle in my body was tense. "Where is she?" His eyes flickered for a split second, a brief flash of something, guilt maybe, but it was gone almost as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the same steely expression. "I don't know where she is," he said, leaning against the doorframe, his arms crossed. "Maybe you should go." "Don't lie to me," I said, my frustration rising. "I know she's been here. I know you're involved in whatever's going on. You took my money. Where is she?" He didn't flinch, didn't react the way I thought he would. Instead, he just shrugged, his voice flat, as he answered. "I'm not the one who took your money, lady. You think I care about that? I didn't make her disappear. If you want answers, go talk to her. She's the one who made her choices." I couldn't believe the way he was talking to me, so casually, as if my life didn't matter. I took a step closer, my hands shaking as I pointed at him. "Tell me where she is," I demanded, my voice shaking now, my emotions getting the best of me. "You owe me that much." He didn't budge. Instead, he glanced over his shoulder, as if debating whether he should say more. After a long pause, he stepped back, pulling the door open wider, and I noticed something that made my stomach churn. Lily was standing just inside the door. She was staring up at me, wide-eyed, her little bear still clutched tightly in her arms. My breath caught in my throat as I looked at her, feeling a rush of relief and panic all at once. "What is she doing here?" I demanded, stepping into the apartment without thinking. "What have you done with her mother?" Hargrave stepped in front of me, blocking my path, and his tone shifted, colder now. "Sarah made her choices," he said again, as if it was a mantra he repeated to himself. "And this little girl, she's not my problem. You need to talk to Sarah. But she's not here right now. You might want to try looking elsewhere." I barely heard his words. All I could focus on was